Fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. Hey, welcome along to Monday's edition of the Mark Steyn Show. And for those of you who sat through those gruelling 3 hours from 3 till 6 p.m, but simply haven't had quite enough of me, worry not, for I am back to fill in for the great man Mark Steyn himself. Remember the Trojan horse affair, that controversy surrounding Islamism in British schools? Well, Michael Gove has come out all guns blazing in a new policy exchange report which challenges the narratives which basically go along the likes of the Brit-bashing New York Times. I mean, absolute classic, isn't it? Mayor Toosey is in for that. And when will we learn the lessons of Rotherham, Rochdale, Oldham, Telford? I could go on. The list does go on forever. GB News' very own Charlie Peters joins us to share the latest controversial decision from the Labour Party. And yes, in case you're wondering, it does involve grooming gangs. Plus, we take a deep dive, a much-needed deep dive, into Ngozi Fulani's charity, Sister Space, as calls for the Charity Commission to investigate emerge from an online investigation. Andy No will be here for that. And, of course, don't forget, you'll have your chance to pummel the Patrick. Yeah, and I just have to take it. For the many of you who tried this last time, I promise you I'll do a few more this time around. GB Views at gbnews.uk. But first, let's get the latest headlines from the wonderful Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening to you. Nurses are set to go on strike from Thursday after talks between the union and a health secretary failed this evening. The Royal College of Nursing chief claims Steve Barclay refused to discuss pay with her. Pat Cullen has said she explained to ministers nurses needed a serious offer to call off the industrial action, but that regrettably they're now not getting an extra penny. That's after Mr Barclay insisted last week that he was willing to negotiate. And rail strikes will also go ahead this week after members of the RMT union rejected their latest pay offer. 63% of the union's members turned down a deal offered by Network Rail of a 5% pay rise this year and a 4% rise in 2023. MP Oliver Dowden says all strikes should be called off.
I think it's only fair and reasonable that at a time when people are struggling both with the consequence of the situation in Russia, Ukraine, as we emerge from COVID, and indeed this winter weather, I don't think most people think it's fair and reasonable to undertake these strikes. So my message to them would be, even now, please call them off.
Well, in news from the Channel Islands, police have named 7 people still missing following an explosion at a block of flats in Jersey over the weekend. They are Peter Bowler, Raymond Brown, Romu and Louise de Almeida, Derek and Sylvia Ellis and Billy Marsden. The Jersey Police Chief said their families agreed to their names being released, adding other missing islanders will be named at a later date. 5 are confirmed to have died in the blast. People gathered for a minute's silence this morning, and the Jersey government said flags are to be flown at half-mast until the 23rd of December. Well, our other main story on GB News today has been the tragedy of 3 boys who've died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull yesterday. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11 years old, were in cardiac arrest when they were pulled from the icy water in Kingshurst. A 4th little boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. Meanwhile, yellow warnings for snow and ice are still in place for much of the UK as conditions continue to cause widespread travel disruption. Those warnings will remain in place until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Last night was the coldest night of the year so far, reaching below minus 15 degrees in Aberdeenshire. However, most of the difficulties caused by plummeting temperatures have been felt in the east and the south of England. There are still significant delays across rail networks, with southeastern trains advising passengers not to travel at all. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio with GB News. And now it's time, not for Mark Steyn, but Patrick.
What is the definition of Islamophobia? It is the dislike or prejudice against Islam or Muslims, especially as a political force. It's pretty easy not to be Islamophobic. Just don't be, really. Just don't be a massive racist. But it is the fear of being called Islamophobic that stops people from discussing certain issues that happen to, at times, involve the Muslim community. And when this fear of being called Islamophobic infiltrates politics, the education system and law enforcement, then it becomes a massive problem for wider society. Let's take 2 big issues: extremist ideology being taught to children in schools and grooming gangs. Just today, Michael Gove said that Britain has a problem with Islamist extremists trying to indoctrinate kids with their warped ideology. In 2014, there was the Trojan horse scandal. Tahir Alam, former chairman of the Parkview Educational Trust, which ran 3 schools in Birmingham, was alleged to have written a 72-page document for the Muslim Council of Britain in 2007, detailing a blueprint for the Islamisation of secular state schools. A report into this allegedly found the imposition of segregated classrooms, the reduction of un-Islamic subjects, like biology, by the way, and the promotion of children to extremist views. But ever since then, there has been a concerted effort to play down the problem, to label anyone who dares to suggest that there's an issue with Islamist radicalisation in schools or an attempt to radicalise kids as just a frothing racist, and an attempt to rewrite history, as the New York Times did by calling it, you guessed it, an Islamophobic hoax. I'm going to quote Michael Gove now because I think he says it best. The notion that the events in Birmingham had nothing to do with extremism is as dangerous as it is false, since it conceals an ugly truth that too many prefer not to acknowledge. We have a problem in Britain with Islamist ideology and its adherents, who seek to impose their intolerant values on Muslim communities, including children, through non-violent means, including the capture of important institutions such as schools. The fear of being branded Islamophobic has only made it more difficult to speak up about such extremism. Islamophobia is a problem, but so is the unnecessary fear of being labelled Islamophobic. And it shouldn't exist, because as long as you're not actually being Islamophobic, then people should have the bottle to speak out about what they can see is happening. I am sick and tired of people using the racism label to block discussion and debate, and in some cases, to hide active criminality. Like grooming gangs. Grooming gangs were left to rape their way across Britain, seemingly because police forces were more concerned about being called racist than they were about stopping the industrial-scale gang rape of mostly working-class white girls by mostly British Pakistani or South Asian men. Don't just take my word for it. Take the findings of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. In fact, that report found the fight against grooming gangs is still being hampered by fears of being called racist. And the report also found that abuse is still happening in all parts of England and Wales. So here we have the prime example of a very real problem being identified, that being widespread grooming gangs of mostly British Pakistani men, and a lack of a desire to deal with that problem because of fears of being called racist. But here's another one. The Channel migrant crisis. People can see the drain to resources that this is causing. People can see the fact that many of these people are not genuine asylum seekers. And yet people don't want to talk about it because they're afraid of being called racist. There's nothing racist about a genuine concern, having a genuine concern that Britain may not have the infrastructure to cope with the sheer number of people coming across in small boats, or not wanting your local village hotel to be commandeered and used to house people who may be about to be told that they'll be deported. These are legitimate concerns that people are afraid of raising with their friends or their colleagues for fear of being called racist. Something has gone seriously wrong somewhere along the way, because we currently live in a country where people are willing to turn a blind eye to Islamist extremism in schools, actively try to pretend it never happened, actually, where police are afraid to bring serial child rapists to justice, and ordinary people don't speak up about security concerns in their own backyard because they are scared of being called a bigot. The fear of being called Islamophobic or racist is used to stop people dealing with problems that they see in society. The irony is, of course, that if those problems remain unresolved, it may actually lead to more genuine Islamophobia and racism in the long run. Well, there we go. We've got loads coming up on all of this, and this is just a start, frankly, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be joined by Mayor Toosey, who will be with you very, very shortly, by the way. There we go. But what are your views on this? gbviews@gbnews.uk. I've made mine fundamentally clear. And it's not the only issue that I'm going to be discussing tonight that I think warrants a little bit more investigation. Do you remember the Ngozi Fulani issue? Yes, that particular lady who decided to get a member of the royal household sacked, or at least pushed for a while. Anyway, well, I remember thinking at the time, there's something not quite right about this, as I know a lot of you did. And there was a fabulous online investigation that took place into her, and we're going to be discussing all of that later. Potentially, just maybe, all is not quite as it seems when it comes to Ngozi Fulani herself, or indeed whatever name that she may well be using, and as well the charity Sister Space. We have approached Sister Space for comment, we have approached the Charities Commission for comment, so we're going to be discussing all of that. Make sure you get those views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm going to be talking a lot about those issues that I've outlined. I do understand that Mayor Toosey is now actually here, which is good stuff, Mayor. Better late than never in a way, although that's not your fault, of course, Mayor. Thank you very much. This is a massively, massively important issue. I'm glad that we can now actually have this chat, because Michael Gove made the very pertinent point that it appears that not only was the extent of the Islamist extremist infiltration of our education system potentially not dealt with at the time, but it is also still a concerted attempt to cover up the fact that it ever happened at all, is there not?
I mean, that's a key point. And in your monologue, you mentioned, you talked about the word Islamophobia. People like Christopher Hitchens started warning about this to us towards the end of the late 2000s, about the fact that certain words like Islamophobia are going to be created and they're going to be used to shut down debate, as well as to, in a hidden way, promote the dark sides of the ideology. And if you say anything bad against it, then you're in trouble. You've already mentioned all the important issues when it comes to the scandals that we had in 2014-15 and everything else. It goes beyond that. It goes beyond just infiltration to push for the ideology, because it kind of firstly exposes the notion that those people who say every single person who comes from the Middle East or North Africa are running away from extremism, so they want to come here. But if that were the case, then why would they? And again, some of them come here to actually still promote the ideology, but again, not just promote. They are implementing certain things like Sharia courts, like forced marriages inside the United Kingdom. Grooming scandals still going on, and that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, we're going to be discussing a little bit later on, actually, with our very own Charlie Peters, a really concerning issue that involves the Labour Party and grooming gangs. Not the first time that we've ever heard that, and certainly won't be the last time we ever say it, unfortunately, as well, when it comes to the Labour Party on that. But, Mayor, on this issue now, I'm keen to drill down and get your views. Do you think that people use the term Islamophobic or racist as a way of actually covering things up, frankly, stopping people to discuss it?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, to shut down the debate, but at the same time, to turn the blind eye to the actual risks. The ones who are mostly pushing for this this narrative that, oh, you're Islamophobic, you're racist, you're this. Some of them are actually the useful idiots from the liberal left-wing side, and some know exactly what they're doing. The hard left ideology, whatever you want to call it, cultural Marxism or whatever they are, hard leftists, they've been doing it for years. They have been also utilizing any marginalized groups. They create marginalized groups, basically. They don't really like Islamism, but they are using, and they're turning a blind eye to the dangers of Islamism as long as it brings down the Western society.
And I think the phrase useful idiots there is absolutely vital. I think there's a huge amount of useful idiots going around when it comes to what's happening in the channel as well. But yeah, I can't seem to get my head around really the true extent of this, because it cannot be underestimated what happened in 2014 and what was revealed in 2014. The segregation of people in classes by gender, the stopping of teaching of topics that were deemed un-Islamic, like biology, OK? When schools' libraries were, I hesitate to use the word raided, but investigated, it found really, really disgusting and distasteful stuff. And a 72-page dossier allegedly written to the Muslim Council of Britain by a particular chap who was actually in charge of no less than 3 school trusts, that was essentially talking about the infiltration of various different secular schools. An undiluted attempt to infiltrate the British education system and pump radical Islamist ideology into it. And are you afraid that this stuff is still happening?
Yes, and different angles, different versions, and it proves the point that if you're complacent as a secular society or just Western democracies, you could lose your freedoms and so slowly, and you won't even know what it is. And the problem we have had for a long time is that a lot of these issues, just because they don't happen, a lot of the useful idiots, and a lot of the liberal friends and all the others that we have, who would say, oh, you're just over-exaggerating. Nobody wants to plant the flag of Islam on top of Downing Street, only because last minute they were prevented. Last minute, or someone stopped it. Maybe even the intelligence community, MI5, MI6 did something.
Just very lastly on this, Mayor, just very lastly on this, I am concerned that if we don't address these problems now, and if they are actually stifled because people don't want to be called racist and people don't want to be called Islamophobic, that it is going to lead to genuine Islamophobia and genuine racism down the line, unforgivably so. We know that the far-right elements of it, although they're starting from a lower base, are the fastest-growing terror group in the UK. We know that, and there's no justification for it whatsoever. But my concern is that unless issues like this are dealt with, it's only going to breed more of that. We are sleepwalking into disaster.
Absolutely, and it's because of the complacency of the establishments in places like the UK and Germany especially. These people need to learn from the pro-freedom Iranians right now doing the uprising against an Islamic Republic. They are literally doing a libertarian revolution to bring down Islamism. They are against the ideology of Islamism, and they could teach us a lesson. This could be a wake-up call to the West if the Iranians succeed.
Mayor, thank you very, very much, as ever. Mayor Susie, a political commentator and a real fascinating standalone voice when it comes to this kind of stuff. Right, well, coming up, people, the stain on this country's past, and indeed, unfortunately, its present as well. Will local authorities ever learn the lessons from the grooming gangs that plagued this country, that continue to plague this country? Our very own Charlie Peters is here, and he has some views to share with us, and indeed some news as well. We've got all of that coming your way. We're also going to be talking about, some would say, a much-needed and long overdue investigation into Ngozi Fulani. You remember her? The lady who cried racism at the palace. Don't you dare move that dial.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
All right, people, a typically chaotic start here, but you love to see it. We're firing on all cylinders now. The Labour Party, they plonk their hands in the sand yet again. And the dots just don't seem to connect for them. 8 years after the Rotherham Child Exploitation Report found that its council and police service failed those, get this, 1,400 minors. A member of that very same cabinet has been propped by Labour to stand for them in their next general election. You could not make this up. I wish I was making it up, actually. Councillor Dominic Beck, remember the name, people, was part of the Labour cabinet that rejected this report. And at the time, Labour leader Keir Starmer restructured the Crown Prosecution Service because the victims from this report had been, quote, failed. We reached out to Labour and a spokesperson said they took the necessary action at the time against officials implicated. I'm not sure about you, but the message doesn't seem to be drumming through to those politicians. Well, here on this is someone who has dedicated much of his time and resources and effort to this very topic, with a documentary coming out soon investigating grooming gangs, and not before time. Broadcaster and commentator Charlie Peters. Charlie, thank you very much, not just for being on this show, but for the work that you're doing investigating grooming gangs, because this, frankly, by the vast majority of the mainstream media, will be silenced or in the news one day and out the news the other, and we cannot have that. Fill us in initially, before we have a broader discussion, on what the living heck is going on with the Labour Party.
OK, so Dominic Beck, this councillor, has been selected as the next candidate for the Labour Party in the Rother Valley seat for the next general election. It's currently owned by a Tory MP, so it's being represented by the Conservatives since the last general election. And the Labour Party have selected Dominic Beck, who has been a councillor in Rotherham since 2011. He joined the council in 2014 after the Alexis J report found that 1,400 girls, at a conservative estimate, got to remember, that's the bottom end of the limit, girls had been exploited, raped, tortured and abused for decades. Now, Mr Beck soon found himself actually in the Labour cabinet in the council in charge as a council leader 7 months before the Casey report, a review into the council, was released in February 2015. In those 7 months, the Casey report found a culture of denial. The cabinet refused to accept the findings of the J report, which found that councillors were ignoring all of the evidence, were ignoring girls, that councillors were telling young girls that if they'd been, if they found themselves falling pregnant at the hands of their abusers, that they were no longer worthy, that the social services and the children's services
and
turned
this is
off
the council. Sorry, just to drill down onto that point. This is the council, members of the council, the Labour council there, saying that this report is essentially not worth the paper it's written on, that these, or some of these 1,400 child victims who suffered the most horrific abuse at the hands of a grooming gang were just
cast
not
aside.
telling the
They
truth.
were totally cast aside. And then an extraordinary quote that came out during this period between the original report that found the abuse and the Casey report, which exposed the council's failure, found that plenty of the cabinet stood up and said that they were lies of the Murdoch press. We now know that they were absolutely the truth. Now, there's no suggestion that Dominic Beck, this would-be Labour candidate, was involved in much of the cover-up, but we do know for sure that Dominic Beck stood by, said nothing, was silent, has never apologised, has never stood up and been counted, has never rid himself of this moment. Because to turn around to these girls and say that their claims are lies and that the Times and other newspapers, these girls were making up their abuse, is a shocking and shameful thing. And if people have been doing that at my workplace, I would certainly want to say that's unacceptable, I quit, I resign. But Dominic Beck did nothing. And in the years have passed, he's continued his campaign of silence and now have a chance to represent Labour in Parliament.
It's an important point of distinction, which is that did he actually help to try to cover this up, or did he simply stand by? I say simply, did he stand by?
Sure, he stood by. It's clear that he stood by. But councillors have been involved in this cover-up for absolute decades. We know in 2005, for example, there was a seminar into child sexual exploitation, which a Home Office researcher brought to Rotherham Borough Council. Yeah. No longer could they say that they didn't know. Members of that meeting who attended that day in 2005 are still serving in the council, are still in the cabinet. I would just like to make an appeal, actually. Am I on camera, right? Members of that cabinet who are still serving, OK, the pot is boiling and the lid is beginning to chatter. We are coming for you, OK? Not even the fastest can outrun the truth. And we know that you're at those meetings, and we know that you've ignored all the warnings for all these years, and you've escaped attention from the media, but that is coming to a close very soon.
Powerful stuff, absolutely powerful stuff. And I must say that brought goosebumps to me, unfortunately, for the wrong reasons in that sense, but seriously powerful, powerful stuff. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick and tired of hearing police force after police force or inquiry after inquiry just basically skirt around a massive issue, which is that people were too afraid of being called racist or Islamophobic to actually tackle it. And for me, there's a clear distinction that's been made here time and time again. Take your pick. Throw a dart at the map of Britain and you will find a grooming gang. And that distinction has been this, which is that police would rather have the abuse on an industrial scale of mostly vulnerable young working-class white girls as opposed to running even the slightest risk that despite all of the evidence about who a lot of these perpetrators were, that they might be called a racist.
Yeah, well, and it's still going on today. I mean, the J and the Casey reports into Rotherham, and just Rotherham in particular, found instances where council leaders were told to refer to Pakistani grooming gangs as men of a certain ethnicity engaged in a certain occupation. That is a verbatim quote from the J report. One Home Office researcher who brought her evidence to Rotherham Borough Council describing patterns of abuse among predominantly Pakistani men was told to never mention it again. And get this, she was booked on a 2-day equality and diversity course.
No.
Yeah, and this is stuff that's not in the national conversation, but this has been going on for decades. That incident I just referred to happened in 2004, and there still hasn't been justice for that woman. There still hasn't been anyone taking responsibility. We're sitting here in 2022 talking about over 2 decades of abuse, and nobody has been punished for it.
Why not, in your view? You have spent, I'm going to get you to finish in the end anyway, with a little bit of a preview about what we can expect here, what the nation can expect. But why, in your view, is this such an endemic problem that repeatedly fails to get dealt with?
There are 2 major issues, I think. Firstly, the victims themselves, the survivors, they're often they're white working-class girls, on average. That's generally the case. But the view of the authorities trusted to care for these girls is often that they're underclass. They're not worthy of anything. One police officer in Rochdale, in Greater Manchester, I have a verbatim quote from a trusted source who told me that they were describing these victims as girls who would not amount to anything in society, and it was better off that they were drowned at birth. Okay, this is a police officer in Greater Manchester. So girls are treated as just trash, unworthy. They were considered, and this is a quote from the Casey report, as they were making a lifestyle choice. This was their choice.
What, as if it's a lifestyle choice to be systematically gang raped?
Absolutely, yes. And older Asian boyfriends were passed off as a fashion accessory. These are verbatim quotes from the reports. Nobody has been punished. And the second reason why this has gone on for so long is, as you've already mentioned, it's the issue of ethnicity. This makes people very, very nervous. We have had a very successful, decades-long political correctness industry, which is worked up into such a threat that when anybody even dreams of standing up for these girls, they are pushed into silence. They find themselves being very nervous. Even some of the bravest and boldest people I've spoken to across the country, Rotherham, Rochdale, Telford and beyond, are very nervous still.
I really wonder, and this is a really terrifying thing to say, and I hope that people take this in the right way, because this has been repeatedly not dealt with in a variety of different, let's be honest, mostly working-class communities. I can't help but wonder that the only way, depressingly, that the grooming gang issue as a nation will be dealt with is if something happens at some kind of, like, upper-class girls-only boarding school or something. When it affects the elite, I think that's when we'll start to see people taking this very, very seriously. Of course, we would never wish anything like that. I'm just saying, I fear that's the only way it will get dealt with. Now, you have been working diligently for us right here at GB News to produce something that I think is going to be immensely important. What is it?
I've been producing a documentary on the national grooming gang scandal. I've been working on it for over a year now. And I am focusing on 3 areas. Rotherham, the pinnacle, really. Rochdale, equally scandalous. And then Telford. Now, only Rotherham and Telford have had reports into the situation there. But we've identified up to 48 other towns and cities across the country where there have been credible reports of grooming gangs. Myself and my team with GB News, we've been to many of them. So we've been meeting with survivors, activists, and people who are involved, I think, in the cover-up. And the mission, the organising principle of this documentary is to start a national conversation, which we never really had when the scandal appeared. And hopefully we can finally bring some justice to those who need it.
Charlie Peters, thank you very, very much. It won't just be me thanking you as well, I expect, when this is released. Right, OK, we did contact the Labour Party, naturally, and a Labour Party spokesperson said the Labour Party takes the findings of the Jay and Casey reports incredibly seriously. The NEC took the necessary action at the time against officials implicated. And that was their response. OK, coming up, the royal row rumbles on. We will be talking Harry and Me Gaines Part 2 trailer. Expect more royal slander and outright cultural shaming. Royal commentator and biographer Angela Levin will be diving into this. And Andy No is here to help us understand the confusion. And there really was rather a lot of confusion, wasn't there, surrounding the royal rabble-rouser Ngozi Fulani. You will not want to miss that. We're back in a tick.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A lot of things don't add up about the Ngozi Fulani story, do they? She was born Marlene Headley, but she's changed her name more times than I've had hot dinners. Despite objecting so publicly to being asked about her origin, she doesn't exactly make it too clear, does she? Ngozi Fulani, a name that may sound all very diverse and modern to the casual observer, but it's actually a mishmash, apparently, of two distinct African ethnic groups. Some would say that's cultural appropriation. It's at least, possibly, a little bit distasteful. Aside from unashamedly ruining the reputation of the 83-year-old woman who dedicated her entire life to service of this great country, questions are now starting to be asked of the charity that Ngozi Fulani was a part of, and the rather generous salary that she may have paid herself. One man who knows of such the danger of such racial politics in the States is journalist, world-famous journalist, Andy No, and I'm very pleased to say, here he is. You just got a cheeky glimpse of him before I even had the chance to actually introduce him there. Andy, look, thank you very, very much for coming here. Now, we have gone, it's important for me to say, we have gone to Ngozi Fulani and Charity Sister Space. We've also gone to the Charity Commission because we wanted to get their response to it. Now, Andy, before I throw to you, I want to add a little bit more context to this for our viewers, for our listeners, and anyone can freely look at a Twitter thread that was posted out yesterday. It was, and I read it with a lot of interest. Now, it's a very long Twitter thread. People can go and find it if they want, but I've got a little summary of it here. On November the 30th, obviously, Fulani published an account of meeting Lady Susan Hussey, as we all know. We all know how that went. I don't need to whiz you through that, ladies and gentlemen, do we? But when you really dive into this, and these aren't just allegations, we have put these to Ngozi Fulani. Apparently, she's a long-term ally of Diane Abbott, and, of course, with it, Jeremy Corbyn, Claudia Webb, we all remember them. And they are serious questions about the income of the Charity Sister Space and maybe where that money has gone. Their income in 2017 was £9,462, reportedly. In 2018, £14,708. Pretty modest. Well, it rose to a whopping £357,000 by 2021. But, and this is the interesting bit, despite the large sums at play here, the accounts are very, very spurious. And there are serious question marks as to exactly where some of that money may or may not have gone. And Andy, you've been obviously having a little look at this as well. Your views and your take on the Ngozi Fulani situation. A lot of people at the time thought there was more than met the eye.
Well, I think she is extremely skilled at playing the media. The story now is still being talked about for the second week now on both sides of the Atlantic. She's been all over the British press, as your viewers would know, but she's also been on a lot of mainstream American media as well. And this claim about racism from or white supremacy plays very, very well to liberal media. But what people really need to center is skepticism, actually, because now I'm not impugning the motives of this woman. However, I thought it immediately was very bizarre that such a detailed transcript was produced of this alleged conversation, and nobody has a photographic memory like that. So I wonder, was there a recording device? And I watched these interviews that Ms. Fulani has been in, and journalists haven't been asking her that. Instead, they ask her about her feelings, and of course, they tie it to attacks on the monarchy and all that. Regarding the Twitter thread, well, this is now the questions that should have been asked from the beginning.
It is. And just before I get you to elaborate on that again, I just want to emphasise this to people. We have gone to Ngozi Fulani for comment. We have gone to Sister Space for comment. We've gone to the Charity Commission for comment. Now, Sister Space is a charity, although it wasn't actually, interestingly, always registered as a charity. And there are numerous different things. It's too long for us to go into in the exact graphic detail of this Twitter thread. It's a very long Twitter thread. But basically, it raises serious questions about some of the amounts of money that were raised by Sister Space, some of which, for example, from Comic Relief, and exactly what that money was spent on, or crucially, wasn't spent on, where that money may or may not have gone, and exactly who may have pocketed that money. And I think, as you rightly said there are serious questions being asked now, aren't there?
Yeah, so just speaking from my, I guess, the American experience of similar type of stories, we've had a longer history of activists and figures in the public who make claims, and whenever that individual or organization that they represent stands to benefit financially from all the media attention, all the Sister Space. Now you go on the website, the first thing you see is donate. One should question motives and ask secondary questions. And regarding these accusations from the Twitter thing, this is what we should have been talking about 2 weeks ago.
So some of them include donations to help set up like a sewing class for survivors of domestic abuse. But then when it looked into it, apparently, reportedly, the sewing machines were provided, but actually people had to pay £5 to actually be a part of the sewing class and bring their own fabric. Reports that there was a huge amount of money that was brought in to try to create some form of website. Well, the allegation is that there was already a website, and actually that the website that was made in like a refurb of it would have cost nowhere near the amount of money that they're saying that it did cost as well. And also they claim that, get this, changing venues between 2019 and 2020 led to a 300% rise in their client base, which seems very, very unlikely unless they had a very small client base to begin with. And when it comes to them actually producing some of these facts and figures in inverted quotation marks, like the size of their client base and like the amount of people that they are seeing walking through their door, there appears to be little to no evidence to see how they reach those figures. And of course, a lot of those figures are used to gain funding, aren't they? And to gain charitable donations. And people have got question marks about all of that.
Well, it seems like Charity Commission should probably take a look. And without speaking specifically to these allegations of which I haven't been able to independently verify, I would just speak to the larger point, which is that I would call and urge the British to look at the lessons that many Americans have learned, particularly from many large activist groups like Black Lives Matter, who receive so much money on people thinking that people giving money based on goodwill and wanting to see actually fighting, against racism.
Well, it's interesting that you should mention that, Andy, because as well it does appear that there are links to Sister Space as well as the Black Liberation Movement, which of course is a kind of offshoot, as it were, to Black Lives Matter UK, and also again other things that have emerged in this Twitter thread. In 2020, Sister Space claimed that their staff had undertaken IT security classes. However, the same year, they admitted that their staff didn't know how to download a video from the internet. Again, it's important to say we have gone to both the Charity Commission and we've gone to Sister Space for comment on these allegations, which raise serious questions fundamentally about, yes, the charity itself, the way that the money may or may not have been used, and everything may well be above board. Maybe it's just a little bit of interesting accounting. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to await their comments on that. But also, as well, the potential motives of Ngozi Fulani, or indeed whatever name she's decided to be called these days, and exactly what those motives might have been when she walked into Buckingham Palace. And I think your overarching point, Andy, from what I can gather, is that if something doesn't smell quite right, people have a right to be a little bit suspicious over it, and maybe the mainstream media shouldn't just fall into people's laps that easily.
Yes, I mean, look to the example of Black Lives Matter in America, where $90 million was poured in, and it was spent on buying expensive properties, as well as paying for the salaries of family members of people who are co-founders of the organization. So I'm not making that accusation here about this specific one, but there are many lessons to learn from America. don't be naive and think that, unfortunately, there are people out there willing to exploit people's rightful sentiments about racism by pushing back against that to enrich themselves.
There are people out there. Obviously, whether or not Ngozi Fulani is one of them remains a matter for discussion and debate. No doubt she would vehemently deny all of that. Andy, thank you very, very much, as ever. Andy, no, they're filling you in on these fascinating question marks when it comes to Ngozi Fulani. Questions that I think need answering about exactly where the charitable donations were taken from, where they went and what the intentions were. And I think, like a lot of people now online, calling for the Charity Commission to maybe step up and just have a little look. It may well emerge everything is completely above board, but why not have a little look? There is more than a whiff of suspicion there. Coming up, we've had a few issues reaching Angela Levin, unfortunately, so let's just see if she can actually make it. I believe... Oh, she is there. Yes, Angela Levin is there. Fantastic. Royal correspondent extraordinaire, Angela Levin, joins us. I believe we're going to go to her next on the latest of the Harry and Meghan Netflix docudrama. We'll be back very, very shortly.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Steyn. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Well, it never ends, does it? Once upon a time, an errant, charismatic prince would have raised an army and marched on the capital. Bonnie Prince Charlie and all of that. Well, anyway, these days, though, we've just got the debased spectacle of watching the once much-loved Harry sell out his country and his culture and his family and stand idly by as his failed actress wife mocks our late, great Queen Elizabeth II and the institution which lies at the centre of political life in this country. And that in the week in which the last of the legendary dambusters sadly passed away. More Netflix, or rather Megflix episodes are to come, unfortunately. What have we got to expect? And actually, I am fearing the worst. Royal biographer Angela Levin is here to discuss this with us. Now, Angela, I believe that we're on the precipice, frankly, of what may come to be known as, for want of a better phrase, one of the longest suicide notes in history when it comes to Harry and Meghan, because I think we're about to enter territory here where they are just openly slagging off our Queen.
Yes, I mean, I agree with you. I knew Harry very well because in 2017, I wrote a biography with him and I was with him for 15 months. And this is just a crumpled, angry Harry that doesn't know which way to turn, really. I mean, he does what he's told by Meghan, but he actually can't work out whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And he wants to please her. That's all is about him.
Yeah, but
So
that is
he's-
a damning indictment.
everyone-
I mean, yeah, it's a damning indictment, though, I think, with it, of the calibre of the British public school system, because apparently it doesn't matter how much money you throw at someone. If you lob them into public school over here, you assume they're going to get a great education. Clearly, Prince Harry has not. But one of my big concerns with it is that there seems to be all-out war on his brother William as well, including them of institutional gaslighting. I can't help but feel as though it's them gaslighting us, Angela.
Yeah, I mean, institutional gaslighting is a ludicrous phrase, isn't it? It's very, very rude, and it means that nothing. You just want to stop people talking, and I feel incredibly angry and fearful for him because he's walking a tightrope. And he's decided that tightrope is for Meghan and not for his family. But he can't just keep on being extremely rude and making up things that are lies, and the intensity that he feels. Why didn't they? They wanted to have a lovely time. Meghan says, we wanted, at last we've got a home that we were longing for. Well, it doesn't seem that to me. They're getting more and more aggressive and nastier and nastier. And they won't win, actually, because they're eating themselves up inside. And King Charles is waiting. He has to wait until after this next series, and then after the book comes, and then I'm quite sure we will see change. But you can't, I think it's ridiculous of ordinary people like me to say to him, do this, get rid of him, because it's not our job. He's a king. He's also the father to Harry. So he's got
has anyone, so basically, Prince Harry had a very similar upbringing to Prince William, whose mother, they shared a mother, she tragically died. Okay, they shared a father as well. No jokes, please. They shared a father as well. Why have they turned out so differently? Because at some point, Prince Harry's going to have to hold his hands up and go, maybe not everybody else can be the problem. William turned out all right.
Yeah, but I think that brothers can have very, very different personalities. Harry wears his heart on his sleeve. And
He had a better
personality.
He had a better personality.
Decided that he wouldn't let this bring him down. He would learn from it and move on. So you've got two very different people. But Harry's been told what to do now. That's the problem. And he's gone with a woman who brings out the worst in him, whereas William's gone with someone who brings out the best with him, encourages him to be a father, encourages to be a good husband, showing him a normal life. Whereas
I think this is the bit now, though, where I suspect this is the regret element coming from Harry and Meghan, isn't it? Which is that this was recorded before the Queen's death. The Queen sadly passes away. Rumours are that they wanted to get some of it redacted from Netflix or changed from Netflix. Netflix said, no, you sold to us to the tune of however many £1 million. You're just going to have to swallow this now. You look like, well, frankly, it looks pretty grim. And it's not going down well in America either, is it? It's pretty shocking stuff, Angela.
I think particularly that pseudo curtsy, I'm sure they wanted that out because it was absolutely hideous. It was ridiculous. And Meghan's squeaky voice afterwards, pretending she's a little girl.
Do you think Meghan, just to ask you, sorry, Angela, do you think Meghan Markle's got psychological problems?
Well, I don't want to be taken to court because she'll be bullying me, but neither of them think straight. Let's leave it at that. It's very extraordinary when you've got so many opportunities to be happy son and a daughter, a big house, 16 bathrooms you can
And she's
choose
so
from.
obsessed with the past. Honestly,
massive money.
Angela, she's like an ex-girlfriend that you'd get a restraining order taken out against. Seriously, it's just, why are you so obsessed with me? Move on with your life. Anyway, Angela, look, thank you very, very much. Angela Levin there, royal commentator extraordinaire. I'm glad we managed to get her in the end. Right, let's have a quick pummel of the old Patrick before we hand over to Dan. And we've got them. Yes, there we go. Well, that was just as well, wasn't it? Christopher's been on. Why does Klaus Schwab and the WEF think that they have a mandate to tell the world what to do? Well, there you go, Christopher. Yes, well, they certainly don't have a mandate to, do they? But, I mean, it's a commonly held view that they think they do. Anyway, right, Dan Wootton is here to macerate your Monday. That's right. Dan, the legend himself. I could hear you chuckling away there when I asked whether or not Meghan Markle's got psychological problems. What have you got coming up on your show?
Oh, yes, I loved that interview, actually, with Angela Levin. You were very naughty, but it was illuminating, Patrick. We've actually got Meghan McCain stateside on this tonight, plus David Maller here because he believes that Harry and Meghan should actually be banned from attending King Charles's coronation. So that's in the clash. I'm very excited, though, Patrick. Anne Robinson is in the studio tonight, the original Queen of Mean, and she's going to be here to explain why she said no to the BBC because she didn't want the weakest link to become the wokest link, which it really has now, hasn't it? Plus, we've got, who do we have? Nigel Farage, he's back. Neil Oliver, too. And a brilliant superstar panel, Carol Malone, Benjamin Butterworth and Suzanne Evans. So you really don't want to go anywhere, right, for the next 2 hours? It's freezing outside. Stay with us indoors.
100%, absolutely. Batten down the hatches, ladies and gentlemen. Get the mulled wine on the go and just watch the wonderful Dan Wootton himself, the king of GB News. Dan Wootton will be with you very, very shortly. I just want to say a very quick thank you to absolutely everybody who's tuned in and who's listened in. This is a show that I love covering for the great man himself, Mark Steyn. Why? Because we get to talk about issues that everybody else seems to shy away from. We've done the absolute lot of it, really, haven't we? How actually the fear of being called a racist is stifling debate when it comes to the radicalisation taking place in schools, when it comes to the grooming gang scandal. We also did a deep dive into Ngozi Fulani, something that, frankly, pretty much every other media outlet is shying away from. And we took a rather different angle on the old Harry and Meghan stuff as well. All of this coming your way after the weather. Don't you dare touch that dial, because Dan Wootton will be with you very, very shortly.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. The cold weather will continue through this week. Ice and frost will be prevalent, and the potential for a bit more snow in some areas. The UK is kind of surrounded by low-pressure systems, but not really having a direct hit on the UK. We're just staying in the cold conditions with snow showers around the edges, but some heavy snow falling at the moment across Shetland, and the snow showers will work into the mainland of northern Scotland overnight. Across the southeast, where we had the snow last night, could be really quite icy here. Elsewhere, most places dry, some misty, murky conditions persisting over central areas, but many places clear, and that will lead it to turn cold, -5, -6, even in some towns and cities, negative double figures across Scotland, perhaps as low as -20 in some locations. More snow showers coming in here as well, so ice and snow is a risk in the morning over northern Scotland. Still potentially icy across the southeast first thing, and then a few showers just drift into southeast Scotland, northeast England later on. They could have some snow mixed in. Otherwise, a largely dry day, reasonably bright, but temperatures again struggling to get much above freezing. It will feel cold, particularly as the winds pick up in the southwest. Now, here we are looking at some wet weather